Well, welcome everyone. We'll do an audio check to see if you can hear me here. And if this goes off without any technical difficulties, I will be shocked. Good evening, everyone. We're going to have some guests here tonight. We're going to talk about operations, and we're going to talk about our visit to the North Metro Model Railroad Club, where a bunch of us got to operate. It was really, really nice. We'll talk about that. Hopefully we'll have Heath will be here, and he got to go to his first first operations session. And quickly send him the link here. Apparently he didn't get my email. And I will bring Ken Zeska up. And there's my buddy Ken. How are you, Ken?
I'm doing well, Tom. How about yourself?
I'm well. I had computer issues all week.
Yeah, I heard you say that. That's pretty bad news.
So my laptop got redone here, and maybe we'll go over all the events coming up, and then we'll talk about this operation there. Let's quick send this out. UI. All right, everybody else got this but Heath. So let's see what we got for upcoming events. And so here's the list of events and new products. And let me take down our banners here. And if you have an event, tell us and we'll put it here. If you got a train show, slide show, flea market, anything like that, we will be very, very happy to post it here and let you know things like that. So, of course, the Twin City Model Railroad Museum, they had a tough time with the blizzard. So I think they'll probably only be open on the 12:30. Have you ever been there, Ken? You been to their night trains or anything like that?
I have. It's just really impressive. If you've seen the Canadian Pacific holiday train, they have a train like that with LEDs all along the side of it. It's really impressive. And of course, the scenery and the city scenes are so nice. It's a treat to see.
It is. I think it's one of the events that's worth it. The Newport Club will be having their show. It looks like January. They'll be open January 1st, December 30th. And hopefully it'll warm up by then. And we can go visit all the new scenery they have done.
Yes.
And, of course, January 14th is their flea market. And that's at the Woodbury High School, Madison. Mad City Model Railroad Show, February 18th and 19th. Worth the trip from the cities.
Yep.
I always like going there. And there's the cost and how to get in there, map. And Eau Claire, the West Wisconsin Railroad Club, January 21st. It's having their open house. So we'll support our local clubs.
So Tom, do they have a layout building someplace, or?
I believe they do. I don't know if it's
that'd be interesting
because it's permanent or it's a modular. I think it's a modular group.
Okay.
And then of course January 14th is the NMMRRC online again. And there will be 8 hours of clinics, breakout rooms. Talk to the clinicians, chat with your friends. That'll be online in NMMRRC YouTube. And don't forget to visit our friends at Scale Model Supplies, our brick and mortar shop there. So I will bring up our guests. We got David and Mike Jordan. We can add some names, and we're going to discuss what went on at the North Metro Club. We all had a lot of fun.
Yep.
We all had a good time at the North Metro. Hello, David. Hello, Mike. Say hello to everyone.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. Ken?
And so we went there. What was it? Friday?
Saturday.
Saturday. What was the date on that?
17th.
Yes.
The 17th. So that was, we had like about a 4-hour session, 4-hour session.
Seemed like 8 hours to me.
Seemed like 8 hours on that wonderful layout. I tried to get some club members here to talk about what was going on, and they had a lot of, it's Christmas time, so they're gone. So Ken, why don't you tell us about what's going on in your, what you did and how you enjoyed that.
All right, I'll do that. There were so many opportunities for jobs, and they gave you cards. So I got the number 8, so I was down number 8. But even at that point, I had really no guess what I wanted to do. There just looked like so many fun things possible. So I said I'd like something with a lot of switching. So they put me down on one of the piers at the Duluth area. And so I went down and I ran Chicago Northwestern, and it was a pier that had Duluth Chemical. It had a large scrap dealer. It had a freight house, and it was just very, very interesting. I spent the whole time there. I was done about 15 minutes early. I thought maybe I could rush off and get the Amtrak train, but I missed the train, and so that somebody else had started that. So I just had a chance to look around and see what other people were doing. Some observations I had. This is such a huge layout, and it's so rare that they get. We brought close to 20 people, and they had a few of their own. It's hard for them so far to get that many people. So the pier that I had worked, hadn't been worked for a while. So it had 14 cars there already spotted, and I was bringing 2 more. So I brought my 2 in, and I went through the deck, and it looked like everything looked like it was ready to come back out, but not everything had scrap in it. And so I was a little concerned, maybe I was supposed to leave the ones that didn't have scrap in them. I talked to one of the club members, and he said, well, they just haven't gotten around to putting in scrap loads into all the cars. So there was that imbalance, 2 cars coming in and 14 going out. So I suspect that's the kind of thing that would get worked out after it operated a few more times. So that's one of the things that I noticed. But everything worked well. I had one car that had, Katie Glad hand was a little low, and it kept catching on a frog. And the different weights and different cars. But the issues that I had when you consider the size of that layout were minuscule, and none of them were more than just like a gnat in the air. There's nothing that stopped me at all. I did have the good luck of operating right next to the thunderstorm display. And fortunately, it was nicely done. Very, very well done. And I'm sure if you were walking around the layout, it was very entertaining. But when you're standing right next to it, I was fortunate enough somebody pulled the plug on it for me before I went totally crazy. So that was my experience working in Duluth, working at a nice engine that ran well, and all the turnouts, and a very complicated turnout. And it looked like they were all being run by servos. So it's great. My experience was really great. I'm anxious to go back. I would try that job again, or I would try any one of a number of other jobs. So. Tom, I see your voice.
We lost Tom.
We did. So as long as we've lost Tom, Dave, tell us what you did.
Yeah, let me go to David here.
Well, I had the high card, which meant that I had about the last job pick. So I ended up, all the switch jobs were gone. So I ended up running 2 road trains basically over the entire railroad. One started in their 2nd Street switching area and ended up in staging, and the other one started in the lower level staging and ended up in Northtown Yard. And they, unless I'm hallucinating, it seemed like they took about 40 minutes each to operate. I see David Clem just signed on, our host for the evening. It was neat running on that main line with, following the signals. The dispatcher did a good job of keeping all the traffic moving, and it's really a kick to follow real signals that are really working. That was kind of fun. I managed to forget my eyeglasses, so it was kind of challenging. I think that's the first time I've ever done that at an operating session, so couldn't read the instructions very well, and I couldn't see what my train number was. Minor details. I'll make sure that I don't do that again next time. And I think the first, both of the trains either had 2 or 3 locomotives and about, I'm going to guess and say 20 or 23 cars on them, and everything was running nicely. The only scary part is going in and coming out of the helix. It's still a little unnerving when your train becomes a subway train and you don't see it anymore. So, other than the experience going in and out of the helix, I had a good time on the main line. And I've been there before. I was there, I don't know, 7 or 9 years ago. We had a similar session. And I thought this one went really well, all things considered, for the size of the railroad and how much you have to do to keep it running. I thought everything was great.
So Dave, when your train went into the helix,
Yep.
you lost contact with it? Did you have anything that indicated that it was still moving, or?
No.
Wow.
Well, actually, what you did have was that somebody in the club becomes the mole, I suppose, for lack of a better term, and somebody gets in the helix. And if there is a problem, should you have an uncoupling issue when you're departing the helix and going up, or if something was to derail when you're going down, there is somebody in there, and he can tell you that, whatever, CP or Milwaukee, whatever locomotives you were using, you have a problem, you're on the ground, this or that. But that gets to probably be challenging even for that person, because there's a certain amount of ambient noise in the space, and depending on where you're standing when he's trying to talk to you, it could get a little tricky. So you really, once you enter the helix, you really need to be on top of things and as close to the helix as you can be, and be aware that if something goes wrong, somebody's going to try to contact you from within the helix. So, but otherwise, no, I didn't see any camera monitoring the trip down or the trip up. I don't know if that existed or if that's in the future plans, but
Sure.
That's something that I'm sure the club, I'm sure I'm not the first one to mention that.
Right. And then you said your experience with the dispatcher was good.
Yeah.
Well,
I have to say that because he was monitoring those things. If I said anything,
yeah, that's right.
I paid him off to say that. So.
Yeah.
Okay. I did hear he told somebody called in and he said, "I'll get back to you," and right away everybody started laughing and said, "That's the Burlington Northern's way of telling you to go to hell."
Yeah.
Sure.
I'll get back to you. That's what it said. It's a railroader's way of that. So Mike, and I want to tell everyone that it's a cold night. I don't know. Maybe I don't know if this is reverse, but you can see what I'm drinking tonight. So.
Yeah, I saw the earlier post of that. Very clever. Very clever.
Yes. And my wife posed for this, so we're having some incident. So Mike got to run the Amtrak.
Yep.
Why don't you tell us how that worked for you?
Well, once I got in contact with the dispatcher and told him how important I was, things went quite well. My experience was a club member, Aaron, he brought the train up from storage through the helix and put it on the ready track. And then I ran from Minneapolis up to Duluth. We ran into a little problem when we got to Staples, but like Dave said, it was fun running the railroad on signals. Dispatcher cleared me to Staples, and
Yep.
Like I said, a club member, Aaron, came along with me, and so we got up to Staples quite nicely. The helix caused a little trouble on opposing traffic because from Staples on, it's a single track. So an oncoming train went on the ground in the helix, and it took a while for them to get that organized. But once we made the meet, I continued on up to the dreaded helix, and then I handed the throttle to Aaron, who was the club member, and it was great because he fought his way through the helix, and as a guest, I didn't have to put up with that frustration. So I think that's probably one thing. If we get invited back, the recommendation is that trains be pre-staged by a club member, put on the ready track, and then the guest takes the train across the layout. And God, the layout is large. It is well scenic. I didn't have any trouble running the train, on the exposed portion of the layout. So that was fun.
Yeah,
And I'd say it was about a 20-minute run if we didn't sit in Staples for, I don't know, 15 minutes or so. So a great way to see the layout.
yeah, I think taking a passenger train like that around is a wonderful way to do that.
The other interesting thing when Mike brings up that passenger train is it really was a beautifully built and finely weathered train. It ran well, and that's really something I noticed about all the trains. Is there's nothing second class about any of them. The engines were well done. The cars were nicely done. Many of them were lightly weathered. The scenery, the track work, everything's first class. I just marvel at them as a club because they've done such a great job.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, Ken. That Amtrak train was weathered quite well, and it was prototypical length, and it was fun to watch it snake its way through the layout.
I think that's the highlight. And we've got David Clem joining us. Hello, David.
Let me unmute. Hello.
There he is. David was our host with the most, and we want to thank you first of all. And it was a lot of fun, and I think we didn't have any issues that we don't normally have on someone's layout. So,
Well,
maybe you can describe how it was for us jugheads to be there.
no, I think it was great, and we had a blast too. And we as members and operators do it all the time. So what's obvious to us, is it's obvious to us, right? We don't see it from fresh eyes. So a lot of the comments we've made note of, some of it's simple stuff, fixing control point names that we've changed over time to match the panels, and we attempted to stage trains. I think Aaron was excited to show off his Amtrak, and that got pulled in at the last minute. And I was just glad no track gave way on us, because with that room, we have problems with expansion and contraction. And 15 minutes before our flea market, one of the turnouts, the solder joint popped due to that. The stress finally gave way. So I was frantically soldering 15 minutes before the flea market to get the section back up and running. So, we had a blast having you all down there. We actually even took your guys' advice. I'm not sure whose suggestion it was about forming a operating group that came maybe every quarter to operate there. We talked at our business meeting last Tuesday about it.
That would be great. That would be great.
Yeah, and the club's very open and receptive and thinks it's a great idea as well.
It's good. So Dan asks here, do people ever get caught up in viewing the layout and mess up the operations?
Oh,
It was a business like.
no, I mean, during flea market, especially open houses, we try to, we have it run loop to loop during those so that we stay out of each other's way. But as you all know, there's a Saunders is a area where we can get into trouble with a single access in that. And I was at one flea market running and got talking to a guest and kind of lost track of my train and noticed it just before it was sideswiping somebody at a diamond, because we get so busy talking to guests that we sometimes forget. Now, during operating sessions, that typically doesn't happen because everybody's focused on their train running. Aaron likes to throw in monkey wrenches, whether it's his Sperry car or a passenger train, to be like the real railroad and tie up things. So, I enjoy it because it just adds variability to it.
So I'll run some slides here of this club, and you guys can talk about the operations. Now, you use car cards and waybills, correct?
Correct.
And David and Ken, you guys had to deal with that. Mike and I really didn't.
Yeah, this is my scrapyard. That's the scrapyard I worked at. And you can see it's complex, and yet, like I said, all the turnouts worked. The cars pulled it out nicely. And it was interesting to look at the things that were there. It was really for spending the whole afternoon there, I was never at a loss for things to do or look at and enjoy.
I mean, even as a club member, there are scenes that people bring in and add, whether it's AJ or whatever, that I get amazed. I'm like, oh, I didn't notice that was there. Somebody's brought down a new building. We have Jeff Hoffman, who loves to sit at home detailing buildings and building them, and he'll sneak them down on the layout and put them in place, and it's exciting even for me.
Yeah, if you notice here, you can even see the guys that are fixing this ventilation system. So
Right.
As many square feet as that layout is, you still have many details.
Yeah.
So here's a question Heath asked: does someone plan out the car cards and waybills? Just throw them in the air, whatever comes back down. That might have worked better for us.
They are planned out in that Darren, who runs that, over a year's time, starts switching things out. So updating the car cards. And they're either 4 or 6 turns. Hold on, I gotta get my grandson back out. He's decided to come to the meeting.
All right, we can do that. So didn't you work that scrapyard?
I did. You know that shot you just had out there about with the you were looking into the factory, right?
Right.
Yep.
So you're standing in the aisle and there's a building there and you are looking into the backside of the building and that's all plexiglass, so you can't get in there and mess it up. But that is so interesting how they've done that. And they've got a couple scenes like that where the building is on the aisle and you can look right into it and see activity. For a layout that's that big, to have that much detail. And the other thing about that detail is it was so clean. Normally you see a big club layout and there's a thick layer of dust on it.
Art, that building you were showing, the box warehouse, that was done by Art. who also did the paper mill that was over in Brainerd.
Yep.
That's one of his. And there's one in Staples that is one of his buildings as well. And sadly, he's had to stop doing this work. He's 83 or 84, and his hands have just gotten shaky enough that he can't do this detail anymore. So we as a club regret, are very sad because he does such awesome work.
Yeah, but you get to enjoy what he did. That wonderful talent, wonderful talent. So this interesting question. Tim asked, how many operators? How many did we bring, David? Do you know how many we?
We started off with, because we used all the cards, so we were right about 13 to start, but I know more people came. And so I would say we were 15, 16 of you, right? Or up to 20, I'm not sure. We have never hit capacity. We've had as many as 30 operating just from members, and that wasn't full yet. We still had more jobs we could have ran. We're actually, one of the things that members mentioned is if we do this quarterly where individuals like you all come back, obviously you understand our system, so you're going to be able to go off on your own, and that frees up club members to start operating as well, and we can start to test the capacity of the layout.
The patience of the dispatcher.
Well, yes, I don't know how the heck you did that, Tom. I can't imagine going to a foreign layout and doing that. There's no way. I would be afraid of messing up everybody's day. So,
yeah, that was fun. So David Hamilton, now did you use one of these panels? These are kind of neat. I didn't get to see this, so.
Nope, I didn't. I don't know. I think you have me unmuted again. Being on the main line, I ended up literally just following the signals that, I assume you were controlling, so I didn't have to work any of those panels.
Well, maybe David Clem can explain this. What are we looking at here?
Yeah, and David Hamilton, you actually, that's all automated within our JMRI system.
Oh.
Tom could, I guess, override it, but it was all automated. So these panels describe the town, give the direction at the top, west, east. On the very top, which is a little bit hard to see, is also a further direction to help. This one gives a sub name. On the main line, it tells you which way is Duluth and which way is Northtown. Just so if you're looking at your car cards and it says go towards Northtown, it kind of helps those that are newer to visually see that. This gives the turnout numbers. So those in orange, the 312, 313, 314, those are all the turnout numbers. So if you need to if the button were to stop working, and things fail over time as far as electronics, and you have like a DT 400, 500, 600, you could use your phone. You could dial up that turnout and throw it yourself. The colors indicate the green is which way the turnout's thrown. And then it just gives you the tracks like ILS West 1, West 2, West 3, and 4. That ties into your car card system. So if the car card says put the car on ILW 4, you can see which track that is. And this is on our Hinckley sub, runs out of the, at the Coon Rapids Junction and heads up to Rush City.
Yeah, Heath asked about 30 operators. We probably could use them any because we didn't run any commuter operations.
Nope.
There were so many ones,
We didn't have the hump maxed out yet either.
Yeah, you didn't have the hump yard going. They have a working hump yard, everyone. Hopefully we'll make a video on that.
And that easily can take 4 to 5 operators, and you really need 2 at the hump, 1 pushing cars over this hump, and there's the other guy switching the tracks to the right side, the correct track for that car. And he's telling the locomotive engineer how many cars to push over the top. So, and then you need people down at the end of the receiving bowl. At the end of that bowl, pulling cars out to build the trains. And you need other people at the other end, with the receiving. So,
how do you uncouple them on the hump?
There's a magnet up there.
Magnets, okay.
Yep. And we fight just like everybody else. If you go NMMRRC standard on weight, sometimes that's too light for the hump. Other cars, boy, the wheels are really tuned well, and that thing rolls freely, and they can get up some speed, and then it's too much.
Yeah, I saw your little catcher device. Here's some crazy guy's pulpwood cars you bought from somebody's old layout. Looks familiar. It's one of the small grain elevators, you know, so you could go in there and switch the whole session.
Yeah.
And these are all modeled after prototypes.
Yeah.
And earlier they were talking about passenger trains. You had the Milwaukee Road Depot with a number of passenger trains in there. And now you have plans to build the St. Paul Union Depot. So passenger trains are a big focus of operations, or can be.
Yes. Yes, I've built the Staples. I built the Milwaukee and Minneapolis. I'm done with stations for a while. Those two really, took a lot out of me. In fact, I just finished the 44th Street Bridge over Northtown today. I took it down to the layout. It's now no longer a temporary green foam building. It's got all the concrete barriers on the sides. It's got the road markings on it. And the only thing left I have is the fences to put on the walkway side so that people don't jump off. So, and then I'll be able to put some people up there taking photographs of our yard.
That's very cool. That's very cool. It was a lot of fun.
Well, we had a lot of fun having you guys there.
And I think something quarterly. Mike, what do you think? Quarterly? We could get together a group up there? Or?
I think quarterly is perfect. I mean, it's gives you the anticipation of being able to run and the excitement of coming up and seeing the changes that happen, you know, on a quarterly basis. And I think
it's you know, if you ran Second Street, you know, you run like a Staples job or a St. Cloud job and do some road switching, and you can get variability.
Yeah. And, you know, the one thing I noticed is like St. Cloud, no one was switching St. Cloud, but it was pre-staged with maybe 12 cars that needed to be set out, plus the pickups. And if no one did St. Cloud, it didn't affect the operation. Trains went right through. So I think that was pretty clever.
Yeah, we have a handful of members who, like Steve that was there, he'll come down on Saturday morning from 8 to 11 and pick an area to work and just work it, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And how long? It says how long to get the basics. We've been doing operations 6 years, and it's a continual growth and learning and adding and changing and tweaking, balancing the cars out, getting the right ones in.
Yep. So if you are working on the railroad, and let's say you're doing St. Cloud, and you switched it all out and you put the outbound tracks east and west or north and south, how do you make up the next train that leaves cars to be spotted? Is there a local that runs and drops cars off, or do you hand bomb the cars?
No, it's a local that comes out of Northtown that has there's one of the tracks is the St. Cloud job, and it's built there at Northtown. It brings over the cars to St. Cloud and then picks up the ones that the operator there has built to come back to Northtown.
Okay.
Northtown's the center of our spoke, and then it heads everywhere, whether it's Seattle, Chicago, Kansas City, whatever.
No, it was just kind of a clever way when you have guests to have these areas pre-staged so people could just walk to the town and start working.
Yeah, and then we try to have locomotives at each spot that stay there permanently to be used.
Yep.
Let me answer this first. Maybe David, you can tell me if I'm wrong. What they are modeling is Minneapolis and St. Paul on the Burlington Northern BNSF westbound out to the Dakotas, like basically Staples, Minnesota, crew change point, and north from the Minneapolis-St. Paul to the ports of Duluth and Superior. And then inside the cities, they have, the Canadian National and the Minnesota Commercial and things like that. So if you hear us mention towns, you don't know where they are, just speak up. But everything is between the big northern transcon of the Burlington Northern Santa Fe.
Correct.
So,
and then our hidden storage, which isn't really hidden, it's just below storage of Northtown, represents Seattle, Kansas City, Chicago, so that because Darren, who's done the operations and waybills, has those cars go off. If the industry isn't on our layout, or if the industry can't take enough cars, we send them off railroad down below, which is what Dave ran. He ran a train down, then brought one back up to Northtown Yard.
So an operating, I think you could probably almost operate for 8 to 10 hours.
And we started at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, ran till about 5, went up to have dinner at the restaurant, and then come back down at 6 and run till 10. So.
Yeah, dinner at the restaurant. Don't overlook that.
Yeah.
That's another one of those marvelous benefits for running there.
Yeah, right above them is a wonderful restaurant up there. So how many days for the bench work? I said, a little longer than that, Heath.
Well, yes, it took, because when we first built, the whole layout wasn't built, even when it was open before scenery. We started at Northtown and went over to Saunders, and that was it. Duluth didn't exist. That whole side didn't exist at first. It was probably 4 years before we got into ops. And I saw one question popped up. We have modified track work since we did it. We found we needed crossovers at certain spots to facilitate switching. So we have modified it.
I think one of the points to notice is you have probably a dozen jobs that don't even go near a main line. There were, Dan Dosa and Greg Dahl and somebody else was down that wall working the alleys of Minneapolis and the commercial. And they had nothing to do with me. So I was like, wow, you can be in there for 3-4 hours in just an industrial area if you don't want to go out and beg and plead to look at the stoplights from some crazy dispatcher like me. You can find a little place to work. Like Ken did that. Ken was in the scrapyard. So.
Yeah, and I suspect in the next year we'll have Kelly Lake up with signaling. I've got the panel built already. We just haven't done the detection yet with the boards and the lights yet because we haven't got the scenery to a spot where we can do that.
And what kind of trains would you have at Kelly Lake?
It's the ore trains.
Red dirt.
More red dirt.
And that's a long run. When you run from that upper level Kelly Lake down through the small helix, come on the main layout, then go down below to the ore docks, you're running like 100% of the layout.
Yeah.
Wow.
Bring some split rock power up there. So.
Yeah.
All right, David. Thank you for coming on tonight at short notice.
Yep. No problem.
Thank you for the invite. We had a wonderful time.
Yep.
We posted a video on the TCD Media. I'll post a link to it.
Okay.
Of being a dispatcher for a day.
Well, and if any of you guys have more ideas on improvements, please send them our way because, like I said, a lot of it we have built because we know we're operators, so we see it from our eyes, not fresh eyes. So any suggestions, AJI and others will enhance. So.
And I think you brought up something we talk a lot about on the podcast, and Mike Jordan and David will say this, is that what you call things on the layout are not what an operator would call it.
Correct.
You're so used to that being, Johnsonville, and we're like, well, that's not what the sign says.
Yeah.
And so I think things like that open up your eyes as the layout owner to be like, I have to change this.
Yep.
Or car cards or something. I need to change that because I know what I'm doing, but the 30 people in the room are all looking at me.
Right. Yep. Exactly. All right. Well, I'm going to bail off.
Thank you, David.
Thank you guys.
Thank you, David.
All right.
Like,
Thanks.
All right. So now we're going to bring up our next victim. And there's Heath.
Oh,
Let's say hello, Heath.
Why did I hear a grunt when I joined? What
I didn't think you heard me.
Want some more drink in there.
how's everyone doing tonight?
We are good.
good.
This operation stuff is wild. I gotta tell you, it's a trip.
So to
It
fill
is.
everybody in, Heath got to go to his first home layout operating session. And then he hosted one live on his own layout. So that's what we're going to talk about because he did everything that we did on our first time. So why don't you tell us about going to that session?
So the first session I went to, it took me a little bit to figure out how to get connected and actually ask somebody to join the operations session. But once I got past that and got invited and got there, everybody was really very welcoming. The environment was very relaxed. People weren't real like tense about like, oh, you're doing it wrong, do it this way or whatnot. First, they paired me up with one of the more experienced guys. We, took a train out. We were on the road cruise, so we were primarily, running from one side of the layout to the other. So I got to learn the layout a little bit, and by the end of the day, I had actually run my own train, which was very. It was nerve-wracking, but it was also great. I did end up crashing the train that I ran. It was not the first crash of the day, though. It wasn't technically my fault, so it all worked out. It all worked out well.
Yeah.
But
Who are
but
you
yeah.
blaming on that? Was that the dispatcher? Because they usually get blamed.
Oh, it's always the dispatcher. No, I don't want to blame the yard guys because I was, we were already getting into a little bit of banter, myself and the yard guys. But essentially, dispatcher gave me clearance to pull out of the yard. The yard guys were moving one of their own trains, and it was a custom turnout where it was kind of a double slip, but kind of also one side of it was kind of like a double crossover. So theoretically, if the switch was set correctly, the two trains would have just passed right by them. And I didn't realize they weren't set correctly. And me being a little bit nervous, I was coming out of staging really slow. And the guys running the yard train caught up to me, and the two locomotives kissed as they hit that double slip / double crossover.
So then you wanted to run your layout with Jammer I.
Yeah, getting to experience operations has really changed my view of model railroading. And I know I've mentioned this. People are probably really tired of hearing me say it, but I was all about rail fanning. I was all about the continuous loop. Like that was the only thing that mattered. And now all I want to do is pull a train out of staging, bring it over to the main yard, sort it out, and bring the train back to staging. So it's a total different world.
Gotcha.
So I did decide, I'm not sure exactly why, that I would do my first ever op session and really my first ever running trains on the layout. I mean, I had run trains on the main line a little bit, but I hadn't really run trains like on the layout through staging, through the yard, like really tested things out. So I said, hey, let's do it live because, when you turn the camera on, everything just works better.
So what can go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong?
You had visitors from all over the world.
All over the world, people watching me fight with my locomotives, going over frogs that I thought I could get over without powering them, and just hadn't gotten to it yet. And I couldn't read any of the numbers on any of the box cars that I was trying to find, and all kinds of stuff. So it took me 50 minutes or so to take a train out of staging to a yard, drop the cars I brought, pick up a new set of cars, and bring them back to staging. And if you know my layout, that's about maybe 10, 12 feet at the most. So it took me 50 minutes to run trains 12 feet, but it was good. It was fun. I'm definitely getting into it. I've been getting into JMRI. I was really struggling with, like, what do I use? Do I use switch lists? Do I use tab on car? Do I use, I just couldn't figure out. Eventually I got into JMRI, did a bunch of sort of building of trains and setting things up in JMRI to get stuff working. And outside of not being able to read anything, it worked out very well. And I'm enjoying. One of the things that I've always said is that I love that model railroading allows you to problem solve, and it kind of works that muscle of problem solving, and adding operations just takes that to another level.
Does that sound familiar, Mike?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, so far, basically everything is a boxcar. So, I'm not getting specific with this boxcar goes to this industry or stuff. It's all pretty general right now, which is partially why I asked the question earlier about, how long does it take to figure out how to set up the operations on your layout. But I'm having a good time. I'm having a really good time, and figured out the frog juicers last night after 2 hours or so of troubleshooting a shorting issue, and the only thing next to do is another op session. So
There you go.
yeah.
So I'll ask David and then Mike, how long did it take you to get, Keith want to know, get set up once you started car cards?
Boy, I don't even remember, to be honest with you. I mean, part of it was, when I started building this railroad, I already had a railroad in my other house before we moved to Minnesota. So I think once I actually had enough up to run, it was just a matter of weeks until I could actually, bring some guys over. So, everybody has a real problem with trying to figure out, how to start, who gets what, how many cars should I send here, how many should I send there. And I know it's easy for me to say, I think people overthink it, but at some point you have a starting point, you have X amount of customers, some of them need cars, some of them don't. So send the ones that need a car or something, and then decide when you're going to pick it up, and then do the same with the next customer or business or industry or whatever you choose to call them. So, I could see though where it could take somebody a year to do that once they actually had the bench work done. But then don't overthink it. Send something out, don't pick them all up the next time, and send some more out, and then start picking them up afterwards. Don't get hung up with the, every industry has 6 cars, so every session I got to switch 6 cars in and out of there. Don't do that, because that's not realistic. So,
Right.
And some places don't get switched. You might have places where it'll be 2 or 3 sessions before you switch it again. So,
In what you were saying, one thing that it reminded me of is in music, they talk about how the silence or the space is what really makes the music. And one thing that I've really had to figure out on the layout is don't just stick hundreds of cars on the layout. You actually need space. Like, to take a train out of staging to the yard, I need space in the yard. And then to bring a train back to staging, I need an empty staging track.
Yep.
So it's figuring out that I don't need to put 100 boxcars on the layout to run my first op session, and that I can do an op session with, basically 16 cars and a locomotive. I think that's also important to realize, is you don't fill the bag all the way up, leave a little space.
Mike Jordan, what advice would you give?
I find a group of operators and operate on multiple railroads of different sizes, and steal what you need to make your operations work. And don't be in a hurry to actually perfect it, because my layout's 20 years old and I'm still changing how I operate it. And I just recently went through the process of, I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to do it, and that's changing the industries that are on my railroad. And that's reusing the same building in the same location, but just putting a different name on it and freshening up the types of cars that I can have on my railroad. So I think you're never done tweaking your railroad to make it interesting. And especially as you learn, you make those tweaks. And I think you're smarter than the average person by understanding that you need that space to operate. I mean, a lot of people start operating and, just like Dave said, you got 6 spots. So I got to take 7 cars and fill every spot, and then just keep pushing them in. So yeah, I guess that's my little hint. And I really enjoyed when you said that you were a rail fan and a modeler, and then someone showed you operations and just changed your whole world, because I went through that same process myself. But, yeah,
I couldn't figure out what people were talking about. Like, people would talk about oh yeah, like operations and whatever, and I didn't understand it at all.
Yeah.
Just
you've come onto the dark side.
Yeah.
Yes. I may have been dragged kicking and screaming.
Yeah.
But,
Where you go down the rabbit hole of prototypes, like Mike Jordan was the best example of, I like running reefers, and then people come over and go, well, you can't run those reefers. You need the orange one. And then it's like you're reading books and videos, and
yeah.
So, because you're modeling, Heath is modeling like a barge terminal on the island of Manhattan that has a land contact north. What's it called? Croton Harmon. I'm sorry. And then also like a barge landing for an interchange, marine rail. It's really neat.
Very, very loosely based around sort of 1960-ish New York Central operations along the west side of Manhattan, but very, very, very loosely based. I'm still all about running my light blue Great Northern boxcars.
Are they the right color?
Yeah, for now. Yeah, big sky blue.
Big sky blue.
Yeah, just wait till he learns more about the New York West Side. But somebody else's JMRI. Kurt says JMRI generated switch list. The benefit of each system. Yeah, I think. Did they use car cards on the layout you went to, Heath?
They did, yes. He had every locomotive was consisted together with another locomotive. So you got a stack of car cards. You'd flip them over, and it would show you what your lead locomotive is. That's what you would throw into your throttle. And then there would be, on the front side of that card, there was a summary of, you're going to go here, you're going to do this, you're going to go here, you're going to do this, here, this. And then you had all the car cards behind that as well.
And I think, David, you've probably been there. Maybe Mike, you can name drop the layout because that was, whose house did you go to? That was.
It was a gentleman named Phil Monat who, yeah, if you know a little bit about the OPSIG or the history of the OPSIG, he was very influential on writing the compendium, writing and editing the compendium for the OPSIG. So it was a little bit nervous of a first layout to go to, but his knowledge and understanding of things really made a big difference as well, because he didn't think things went well. But for me, as a new operator, it was perfect. It was pretty perfect.
As a layout owner, we always think that. You know, we just want to sit in the doorway and watch you guys bring it to life, and hopefully the soldering iron doesn't have to come out. But
he did bring out the Sawzall to cut a piece of wood out. He recently went to NCE, and he's always changing around the track work, and he ran a train, you know, through some of his new track, but didn't run a double stack through. So the first double stack train that went through didn't fit, and all of a sudden we heard like Sawzall going off in the corner, and he was he was making it fit.
Did you ever see the video of the auto racks going under the bridge that were misrouted, and the bridge is basically can opening everything?
Oh,
but, yeah, that's
probably
more than a Sawzall to fix that. But.
Yeah.
But that's every layout owner's nightmare, but it happens every time. So, you know, I think what happened to you with the frog juicers, that was minimal. You know, now you learn that, okay, dead frogs with DCC. And with N scale too, you can't have current keepers.
Yeah, well, and partially what it was is I tested it a little bit with my SD70 Aces, which are 6-axle, you know, much longer trains, and then, you know, I started switching the yard with a 4-axle NW2 SW7 or something, and it just, you know, that difference is huge when it comes to the size of the frog.
Yeah.
Now, Ken, you're starting operations. Does some of this relate to you as you're trying to implement?
It really does, and it's and you learn so many little things. One is I learned I built all these cars that I like, and so I end up with a terrible imbalance. Prototypically, you wouldn't have a train with a local train, if you will, going out to the grain elevators with 10 different road names. You know, they're all going to have the home road, or mostly. So I've got to balance that. Same thing with balancing power. There's so many little nuances. You were talking about, Mike mentioned, you've got 6 spots. You've got to go in there and put 6 in and take 6 out, but it just doesn't work that way. And so what I've done instead is increase the maximum size limit of what I can take with every train, but I'm going to not take that maximum every time, and I'm not going to pull out that maximum every time. So I'm going to build a little bit of an imbalance in my industrial area, just to make it just a bit more challenging, not to be a nuisance, but more to be a prototypical nuance of how things really ran in these industrial areas. So that's the kind of thing you learn just when you have operators come and say, geez, you know, you could do this. This would be kind of fun. So, yep, I've learned a lot, and I'm listening. I love what you guys are talking about. It all makes sense.
It makes sense, and when you start doing it yourself, it'll make sense in a completely different way. And that's what I like. Even in going through the process of JMRI, it was like, you know, I would say, okay, like, here's my idea. How do I do it? and I would get 20 different ways to do it. And through that process, I learned, what I thought was a good idea. And then to actually operate it was, complete. It worked,
Yep.
but also I now saw it a different way.
Sure.
Yeah.
It is two different things. Going to someone's house and you do this or this, and you notice these little things, and then when you have to host, then it's on you.
Right.
And I think, like you said, as you're going through this NMRA, even the AP, getting the certificates, operations is going to point out all those things to make your layout better. Okay, now I need this. If I can do this certificate, that'll make my layout better.
Right.
And things like that. So,
to answer your question you just posted about giving feedback, the feedback I got after my ops session, particularly from the YouTube audience, basically everyone explained how I was doing everything wrong. So that's if you ever want to know what you're doing wrong, posting videos on YouTube is a fantastic way
highly
to
recommend.
find out. Yeah.
It just brings up the one thing it's hard, like you said, you didn't know what it was or what the big deal was, and I've always thought this too, is how do you make videos about operations interesting?
Sure.
Because you really, when you're watching a video, you really don't have, and Joe Fugate said that you don't have any skin in the game.
Yep.
And I don't know whether people present it wrong or do this or not, follow a local out and do the work. It's not explained, but you look at a video on how to weather something, 500,000 views, here's operating, the Johnstown local, 50 views, and it's just, so it's hard. It's like a rock concert, it's like, oh, I like this band, and you listen to a record. If you see them, in the concert, then your eyes are like, oh, okay.
So
I
I do have a theory on how to make videos of operations, but I don't know if it actually works. But the idea being that you present it as if you're doing color commentary for a sports event, to some extent, right? So you're talking through what you're doing, you're talking about why you're doing it, why it's important, and those various aspects of it. But like you say, unless people are invested in it, it is hard. And how do I get somebody invested in moving this 50-foot boxcar over to an industry? So,
or how do you say we have to get our freight here so we can meet Amtrak at this place and whatever.
and honestly, people want to see the mistakes. That's the other side of it. And that's if you are videoing an op session and you're editing out all of the mistakes, then that also, I think, limits people's skin in the game. Whereas, I was having problems in the yard getting over switches, and it was like everybody was engaged, like, is he going to get over a turnout or not? And I think that, for me, that sort of beginner, not knowing what you're doing, but just sort of showing how it actually happens, is important to get more people into operations. A lot of ops videos you see, everything's perfect, everything runs well, everything goes exactly how it's supposed to go. And the reality is, the second you turn the camera on, nothing goes as planned. So.
Right.
I think you hit it on the head. Is just like doing railroad tours. You always end up going to the one that's all done. I want to see the one that's under construction. What's behind the curtain. And so the same thing with operations. If it is pristine, it's not quite as exciting. I mean, so the mistakes kind of draw people in and say, well, they want to tell you how to fix it.
Yeah.
So that's you know, and we all watch NASCAR for the wreck.
That's what I was going to bring up was NASCAR. Yeah. Yeah, Heath got about an hour and a half of unsolicited advice on frog juicers. That was amazing. Which I think most layout owners get too if something goes wrong. So no, that's kind of interesting, Heath. Maybe that might be something experimental on the split rock, and I can, you know, hear something derailed or hear this or this person shoved that car this way, and
That's experimental?
yeah, well, Tuesday.
I think he means sharing it as the experimental
yeah.
part,
Okay.
not that it happens as the experimental part.
I hide it well. The blooper reel would be 3 hours long on my 10-minute video. So
Yeah.
so where do you go from here? Are you going to get on to more house layouts or join the OpSig or?
I was a member of the OpSig at one point. I'm not sure, to be honest, if I still am or not. There's a website called operatingsessions.com. Eric Smith, I don't know if he's the editor of the OpSig or if he's the president of the but operatingsessions.com, they're listing a bunch of people's layouts that do operations. So if you're, you know, ever traveling or whatever, that's a good resource to find operating layouts. I do want to get to more, you know, layouts to see how more people operate. Not exactly sure how that's going to happen yet, but that is definitely the plan, is to keep expanding what I'm doing here. Try and get somebody here that is a more experienced operator to operate on my layout as well, and go from there. You know, keep breaking things so I can keep putting them back together again, because
You just
that's
need to
model railroading.
plan a trip to sunny Minnesota, you know, in a couple months when it warms up and we can all function normally.
Yeah, I was gonna come up there this week, but I don't know.
No.
Yeah. Come up when it warms up 20 degrees, so then it's only 5 below. So
There you go. But that is a wind chill number, so you know that's not real anyway.
it's not real. So
And I agree with Kurt's statement that JMRI is a really amazing piece of software, but there's also a lot in it, and you can really tailor things to how you want things done. And everybody has a different opinion on how things are done. The JMRI groups.io was extremely helpful in helping me set up just to get to my first operating session. So any questions about Operations Pro, you know, just I would jump in there and check that out. Those are some really helpful guys over there.
now I think too is that maybe the guys here in chat don't know is we can operate your layout remotely.
Yeah, so long-term plan is that there'll be 3 operators, 2 here in the space, and then 1 that can operate one of the industrial areas separately. And that started initially, the remote operations was conceived for one reason, and now it's sort of turned into, you know, you kind of need more than 2 operators to run what I have here, but my room isn't big enough for more than 2 operators, so it gives a way for, you know, somebody remote to be brought in as well, and to share operations with people that might not have done it before as well.
So could you explain how that happens? I mean, does that industrial part come up on my screen and then I use a cursor to move things? Or do you actually remotely control the locomotive in the car?
Yeah, so one of the reasons that I used JMRI Operations Pro is because the remotely operated part of the layout is controlled through JMRI. So if you go to my website, you can actually kind of see a write-up of it, but you log in and you bring up a window of the camera of the industrial area. You bring up the JMRI web server throttle, and you bring up a JMRI web server panel. And I have magnets on that section of the layout, so the remote operator can couple, uncouple cars, switch the turnouts, operate and see the locomotive completely, on their own with no local support whatsoever. So the goal is that we'll set up a train in the main yard. It'll get sent over to the industrial area and dropped off, and then that remote operator will, swap the cars out, and then they'll basically come pick up that train and bring another train in, and just keep that going. Dwight, it's not on 24/7 right now, but if anybody wants to operate it, just reach out to me. It's pretty easy to find my information. It's out there online. And we can set something up. That section of my layout can be run two separate ways. It can be run as a part of the full operating session of the layout, and then I also have it set up where it can be run as a challenge. So we can put about 7 cars into that area, and you can kind of challenge yourself by it brings up a little randomized list of where all the cars should end up. And you basically sort cars in that area as a, as an independent sort of game.
So on screen it says 24/7. So, if I got up at 2 a.m, I could run trains in your layout room, and you'd be sound asleep, and you come in the next morning, and everything would be disarray.
I don't leave it on 24 hours, 24/7. You would have to contact me. It's N scale, so it's not 100% bulletproof. Like, there is still some, N scale sort of tweaking, you might say, of it. But it works pretty well. I was surprised how well it actually works. So
That might be a good, one of the Friday nights to bring that on, and then we can let people, from the division operate it.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
The first time we should probably do it offline, just so people, because logging in and stuff takes a little bit just to figure out how to set the windows up. But then, yeah, we should definitely do that.
Yeah. And Ken and I were talking, that might be something to have at the modelers retreat.
Yep.
Yes.
We'll get a laptop and have that set up, and people can sit down and can operate a layout in a New York City apartment.
You can run this with Y throttle. So you could, if up on a screen, you could have the camera and the switch, the switch list, or the panel to switch the turnouts. And you could have a Y throttle, or even one of the TCS UWT throttles, and you could use that to run it remotely.
So now one more thing, Heath, you and I have been talking about all week is with N scale, not kind of tough seeing reporting marks or something. So we've been talking about putting tabs on cars. I know that Mike and David and Ken, you guys operate on other N scale layouts, Mike Fox's and Ken Browski. Do they put something on the roof of the car so you don't have to strain our old eyes, Mike? Does Ken do that?
No, it's all read the numbers.
So, okay.
Wow.
But, if you got a consist, you can kind of guess which car, the box car that's going to go to the pencil factory is, So it's not that difficult. But if you're in the yard and you got to switch out 8 box cars, now that's kind of a young man's job.
Well, that was Heath. You had two reefers that were a letter apart. URTC and UR.
Yeah, URTC and URTX, and my yard. Even though there's like 5 yard tracks, once you get 3 of those yard tracks filled up, you can't see the numbers on the other 2, and the top of a brown box car looks like every other top of a brown box car. So I'm gonna. If you've ever seen my layout, I've got. Let me see if I can grab one real quick.
It's the Joe
this
Bennett
is-
layout with 500 brown boxcars.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is one of the boxcars that I use on the remote op session, and you can make out it's got a number that I just used a P-Touch to put on top of it. I'm going to improve this system by using some styrene I-beams and put the numbers like on the I-beams and make up little tags for all of the cars so that I can identify them without having to get out a microscope, essentially.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so that's coming up. We'll see how that goes once the styrene arrives. We'll see how well it actually works.
That's a good case for colorful cars, right, David? You can have
Oh yeah. Yeah.
find the
Well-
red Santa Fe one.
So the cars that I use on the remotely operated one are the Great Northern Circus cars, so that they are pretty much all different colors. So you can kind of make out the numbers and you can kind of make out the colors, and between the two of those, you can figure out which the cars are through a camera, however many miles away.
That's good. That's good.
I think Di's causing some problems in the
Yeah.
chat, saying Ken needs some more Christmas lights.
Yes. We went out on our annual Christmas lights tour, and I said we're going to go to Ken's neighborhood because they really like their neighborhood up. So.
Yeah, and Ken didn't do a good job.
No,
And you didn't stop in for a drink?
we heard you were out of Ensign Morgan, so we weren't.
Yeah, but you could have I could have let Diane operate on the railroad.
No. Oh, she wants to dispatch. That's just wrong. It's just
Oh, well.
She likes bossing everybody around.
So Randy brings up ops that have gone numberless. I did get an old model railroader. I believe it was from 1984. There was an article on wheel reports, which is, a lot about just, this industry needs 2 boxcars. Just send it, any 2 boxcars. And for a long while, I did think that I was going to use wheel reports on this layout. But then I went down a rabbit hole that I don't advise anybody to go down on their own. And there's something for me about, I felt like if I did wheel reports, I would always be taking the easy way out. I'd always grab the 2 closest boxcars. I'd always, make the switching as easy as possible. And by using the numbers on the boxcar, it creates, using the numbers on the boxcar and using JMRI, which randomizes everything, it sets up scenarios where you have to work and you have to think to move things around. So
I thought wheel reports, I tried to implement them on Fremo, like when Fremo set up and the guys wanted to operate, I would bring out that. But even then, they people were against it. They wanted a switch list, so then they'd take 5 hours to enter a switch list, and I'm like, you guys could have been running. But I get why the wheel reports, you get down the rabbit hole of the right car numbers, and then like Mike and Dave, and then you go down the rabbit hole of the correct car, and then the correct car for that era. And then Mike, how did you clean that car?
Yeah.
It's never ending, but it's fun. It's a fun rabbit. I think all rabbit holes are fun.
yeah, and I mean the other side of it is, as I'm refining my operations, I'm kind of realizing, like, I don't necessarily need to go buy more stuff too. Like, I guess that's kind of become a realization as well, is that it's interesting kind of just taking what you have and seeing how that works, and then seeing, okay, what do I really need to buy to tell the story I want to tell? And you become a little less of a, what my girlfriend might call a hoarder, what I would call a collector. It's all, just semantics.
Yeah.
But
You're not You're not a true model railroader if you just don't buy on the whim.
Don't ask him about his GG1. So, but no, you get there because
got what, one or two GG ones, I
one
think,
or
over
two.
there.
I mean, if you walked around a train sale with like the four of us, none of us hardly buy anything because it's very specific. Well, three of us, Ken can't find any S scale.
Right.
But really, you're going in there. I'm like, well, what can I fit on my? I'll look for an automobile, or look for something. So yeah, when you get to that point, then you realize, like I said, well, now I'm going to save money because I'm trying to fit this narrative of Southern California, the Burlington in 1970, some dirt hauling road in the 60s, and
But you never really save money because there's always something to buy when you're a model railroader.
That's unfortunately very true.
Yeah.
And I guess the other thing too is once you start really getting into operations, you end up coming up with your own, railroad line, like the split rock, and then now you're repainting everything that you own for your layout. So there's all different levels of rabbit holes to go down.
Yeah. I was listening to that Around the Layout podcast, and he was talking to the gentleman who has the Oregon short line. It's N scale, but it's Northern Pacific, Great Northern SPS, and he did that because he didn't want to repaint N scale engines. And I'm like, smart man, because Heath is learning about repainting N scale engines. So
yeah, I'm getting closer to thinking about tackling that, but I do want to recommend. There's a podcast called The Crossing Gate, and they actually did an episode on rabbit holes that was kind of interesting as well. So that might be worth a listen.
Randy brings up a point here too on a larger club, and I don't know, David or Mike, if you do, but cars are in a group.
Yes.
I was going to ask Ken if the scrap cars were in a group.
They weren't, but there was a freight house there, and there were two tracks on the freight house, and the four cars on that were spotted there came out as a group of four, which I thought was rather interesting.
Yeah, I think Milt does that with his ore cars. I think Jeff Otto is groups of 3 or 5.
Yep.
I think trying to think who Russ Nyquist runs ore, so he runs in groups of, they have bigger layouts. So you can do things like that. No, I think it'll be fun watching you go down this rabbit hole, Heath, and how things evolve for your terminal, and the cars that change in and out. And,
yeah, I'm kind of curious to see it as well.
Yeah, well, I want to see you switch the car float the first time. That's what I want to see. And
I've got a plan for it. JMRI, I'm still figuring out a little bit how to move trains without locomotives, which is an interesting thing to do in JMRI. Because you can't put a locomotive on the car float.
right.
So one of the locations is the car float, but it can't have a locomotive. So how do you move those cars with no locomotive? It's possible. That's a whole nother rabbit hole we can go down at some point. How to actually do that? But I've theoretically got it working. I just need to actually do it.
We need to explain idler cars to them.
Yeah, I've got a couple of those as well. Those I have not figured out how to get into JMRI yet. So right now they're just not in it. But
don't even put them. Just have flat to make them flat cars with no number.
Yep, and that's all they are right now.
They're not, because you don't want that to do anything. Yeah, you could have a car flow locomotive. The craziest thing I saw like that on the prototype was we had a flat car carrying telephone poles, and they were hanging over only on one end.
Yep.
And so they had a flat car, empty flat car on that end underneath it. And the guys were switching it in the yard, and some customer in Nebraska ordered a flat car, and they decided to send that one.
Oops.
And we're like, I don't think we can take that car out of there. So it does kind of get interesting. So no, don't put a number on there.
Yeah. So real quick, the way I'm doing it is you can do a locomotive change on a route at a location. So you do a locomotive change and you set required locomotives to 0. And that allows you then to take the locomotive from the freight terminal, push the cars onto the car float, and take them off using the freight terminal locomotive, not the car float locomotive, by just doing a change locomotive in JMRI between the two locations. So,
David, what do you think of that?
Car cards and waybills. Yep.
Handwritten waybills, right?
There you go. Well, I have a program that does the waybills, where it's a drag and drop, point and click thing, so it's at least you can read them. And I'm actually in the process of remaking a bunch of mine because I added a few new places and I had to write them out by hand, or I'd talk Karen into doing it because her handwriting's a lot neater than mine. But now it's a company called Shenware, like SHENWARE. And I'm not sure if it's still available or not, but it works. And I've totally re-waybuilt the whole town of Winona. I did that yesterday or the day before, so I've gotten away from all the handwritten waybills, and you can actually read the things now. And I finished entering a bunch of stuff today so I can get started on the rest of the railroad. But it's very tedious. But once it's done, once I finish entering all this stuff, I can just print whatever waybills I need to replace whichever ones need to be replaced. So it's a project I was going to start 2 years ago, and I finally got into it yesterday. So whatever.
Yeah. As a new operator, car cards and waybills make me nervous because I feel like you have to know something about how things operate to use them. Whereas like JMRI, it just like things are just random, right? There's no like kind of logic to it or whatnot. But for some reason in my head, when I think about waybills and car cards, I feel like I have to understand what car cards to put together to make a train to then move it. Which is kind of why I made that joke earlier about like, can you just take the car cards and just sort of shuffle them up and just like say, okay, like these are going on this train. Or do you need to understand, okay, like I need, if I need these 3 boxcars to go to that industry, I have to manually grab those 3 car cards, put them on my locomotive, and write down that these are going to that industry.
I've never had that problem, but I can see where you're coming from. I mean, and this is where we could go on all night about this, but when I send a local to a town, for instance, if that town already has 7 customers and 18 car spots, I like to run like the locals all have 8 and 10 car trains on them. So it's easy enough for me to just arbitrarily decide, well, 3M Manufacturing and Prairie du Chien is going to get 2 boxcars and 1 covered hopper, and the scrapyard is going to get a car, and the canning plant is going to get 2 boxcars. I make it up as I go, period. And I don't try to overthink what I'm sending out on these trains. And then as far as the pickups are concerned, I mainly use that 3-box system, like set out, hold, and pickup. And I take all the cars that are in the hold boxes, which I just decided they should be hold cards in the first place. I move them all to the pickup box. And I take the set out cars, and I usually put about half of them into the hold box. And I flip the waybills on the other half so they get picked up. So, in my warped way of thinking, that becomes random. and it seems to work, and I visually can keep an eye on how many, if I have 10 cars going out, sometimes they only pick up 7 cars, and maybe the next time they'll pick up 2 more cars than they go out with, and I just keep it mentally adjusting the waybills to fit that picture.
Yeah.
You know.
I think, let me see if I can sum up what you were saying, Heath, is that, David and Mike and Ken, think about like a town on your layout, and the industries that are in that town, and you through research what they're going to receive.
Right.
And so, Heath, I think Heath is saying if you just ran them up and you send a tank car and a gondola off to a town that has no oil dealer, it's not that random. Is that kind of it, Heath? That you have to understand that Selkirk, New York has an oil dealer and a scrapyard, and that is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah. So for me, a year ago, I was a continuous loop model railroader. So the idea of a boxcar needing to go to an industry is a completely new concept to me. So I don't know anything about prototypical operations, or I should say I don't know enough about prototypical operations to even understand how that boxcar gets from X location to Y location. And I feel like in order to assemble your car cards, you have to kind of understand at least a little bit about prototypical operations. Yeah. And JMRI and having to enter stuff into a program that's doing a lot of that for me is allowing me to learn how those moves would happen, that maybe in 2 or 3 years I could probably make up my own car cards and waybills and sort them and figure it out. Sure. But right now, as a brand new operator, I feel like I need to lean on the software to help me learn what operations even, is, what it means.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah. It's a new, they talk about like learning a new language, right? Like when you become a doctor, you learn this language that involves all these words that nobody understands. Like when you become a lawyer, same kind of thing or whatnot. When you start operating on a model railroad, I'm learning these terms that even a month ago, I didn't even know what the term was, or that it even was something that existed. So that's a little bit what the software is helping me do. What's the difference between a yard track, a spur track, a classification track, an interchange track, or a staging track? I had no idea a month ago, at all. Like no idea about any of that. So,
did anybody? How about the secret handshake? If you learn that,
yeah. What'd you say, Mike? What was that?
I just said run, Heath, run.
Yeah, run. There's no going back.
Yeah, I'm working my way through the compendium. I figure I should have it memorized in about 10 years.
All worn out.
Yeah.
Then we'll teach you timetable and train orders.
I thought we weren't supposed to talk about those guys.
Yeah, then you'll want to quit the hobby with those guys. Ken, what do you think?
I'm really enjoying this because there was a note over earlier about car forwarding. I run a Granger operation in the fall, and so one of the things that has to happen is you bring empty cars up to spot at the mills, and then there's loaded cars that are coming off, but these loaded cars don't have a destination yet, what they used to call rollers. So I've got to find a place, I've got to find a way to communicate to the crew that they just have to stuff them somewhere and write down where they are and then go off and do their work. And then later I'm going to send another train up to sort through them and find specific cars because the conversation I had with a guy that was chief clerk out in Glenwood years ago was they would have all the sidings filled with grain cars, and then they'd have to go out and sort and take the 10th one in and the 12th one in, and it just wasn't go out and get 3 grain cars. It was go out and get these 3 grain cars and take them to Duluth or take them somewhere else. So those are the kind of rabbit holes you can get into that are really a lot of fun, and I'm enjoying listening to Heath trying to figure out how he's going to even figure out where these rabbit holes are.
Yeah. It's refreshing. We're all jaded, Heath, so don't worry about us. We're all jaded. But
so Tim makes a comment about the colored pins, and I don't know how well it showed up on my op session, but I do actually have colored pins not on my cars, but on my tracks. So I have switches that'll turn on and off all of my yard tracks, and the way I identify all of my yard tracks is with colored pins. So I don't know that I want colored pins on my cars and on my tracks, because that would just completely confuse me.
Yeah. No, this is a good discussion.
So Heath, here's something that I've done is I give wheel reports. The yard master gives wheel reports to the switch crew, and it says track 5 has got these 10 cars on them, and 2 of the cars go here, 2 of the cars go there, 1 of the cars goes here, and the rest stay. So I made up these little H channels, kind of like what you were talking about.
Yeah.
And they're in a couple different colors. And so the yard crew goes out there, and as they pull that yard, they put chalk marks, I call them chalk marks, on top of the car, and that tells them which train they're going to go into. And then they start assembling the trains on different tracks. And then that becomes an ongoing thing. When you send that train out, you take the pegs off the top, of course. And one guy that came here who really likes car carts says, well, why would you do that? Because all you'd have to do is go through, look down the track, and then stack the car cards on the cars, and then you got the same thing. And I went, well, yeah, I guess, but if you don't like to see people throw car cards on your layout, then this is another way to do it.
Yeah, I'm definitely. I'm going to kind of combine 2 different things. I'm going to use the little things that you have that you're using, and I'm going to put the numbers on those, and then I'm going to have colored pieces of flat styrene that fit into the top of the H channel. That is then the color. So you would see the number, and then you would put the color on top of it to help you sort things out.
Yep. Well, and that just shows there's lots of different ways to go about this, and they're all a lot of fun. But you have to realize that no matter what you do, what you choose to do, there's always going to be somebody on the internet that tells you why you're wrong.
Sure.
But it'll be interesting because I want to see how much you can adapt in JMRI and with William and stuff, because everybody takes cards or their other operation and skewers it. Mike Jordan has a genius way of moving perishables with these waybills that you actually punch holes in. Yeah. And David has them with the colored where you move, and Ken, everybody has even if they're car cards and waybill, they've done it some different way. Greg Dahl just has a single card. And so I'm curious, as you go through JMRI, as sharp as you are with this, how do you adapt it to what you want to do?
Right.
Versus, everybody else's layout from Carolinas to California using JMRI. So.
Yeah, and I will caution people, don't reinvent the wheel. I know I'm doing a lot of that, but just don't do it.
But we're model railroaders. That's what we do.
Yeah.
I know.
That's what we do. So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone. Good chat.
Yes.
And we'll check back with you again, Heath, and see how your next session goes. And I know we're all going to operate between Christmas and New Year's. We've got a lot of sessions planned here almost daily because no one's going to work. So
No.
I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and we'll have a lot of videos. And everyone, have a Merry Christmas if you're watching this.
You
Be
too.
safe.
Yep.
Stay
And
warm.
just for guys in the Twin City division that are local here, the second Thursday night in January, we're going to have our TCD meeting. It'll be on Zoom or on Facebook Live. No, on Zoom. Yep, you're right. And so please join us, but take pictures of some of your projects, and we don't need them all done, but some of your projects, we'll put them into a slideshow and you can talk to us about them. We'd appreciate that. If you're in the area and you're looking, like Tom said, a bunch of us are going to be running operation sessions. If somebody else is really interested in running, a bunch of us would be happy to host you. So get on the TCD NMRA page and talk about that. And then finally, the NMRA has put together the interchange, which is on Heath, what's the real name of that thing? Discord. So go on to Discord and join us because it's a great thing for the NMRA to do. To me, it operates like Facebook, except it doesn't have all the creepy guys and who just whisper a name out loud and all of a sudden Facebook ads are coming up on all that. Discord doesn't do that. So come join us there and let's just keep expanding our community.
Very good. Very good. David, anything to say?
I'm eating a lot of cookies and expanding my waistline, but I don't know if that fits in, but it's reality.
The model railroader way.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was finally paid back with karma. I left about 5 o'clock this morning, and I knew I had to shovel for the 20th time, and I opened up my garage door, and my neighbor shoveled my driveway.
Really?
Because I've been over snow throwing his. We share a driveway and sidewalk every chance I could, and I'm like, I don't want to do it this morning. I don't want to do it when I come home. And I opened up the driveway, and I was like, and Donnie says, well, how do we thank him? I said, cookies. Just give some cookies.
Cookies, yep.
If you go to Amherst in January, the women in model railroading are going to have some cookies for an event at Amherst. So if you were on the fence about going and you like cookies, there's a good reason to attend.
There you go. Good deal.
Where's this guy who says it's going to be 80 degrees for Christmas?
Roy, San Diego, Roy.
Yeah.
Now, Roy is the guy who sent me pictures for your palm trees. Mike made his palm trees for Christmas. So
Yeah. I'm going to have to send Heath my Christmas card. I forgot
Yes.
about that.
yeah, that was one of the good ones.
Yeah.
San Diego's 90 degrees warmer than it'll be here then. That doesn't even seem to be possible.
Yeah.
That's why I told my brother who lives in Houston that the temperature is going to go up 40 degrees and it's still going to be below freezing.
It's okay. I always tell the people in California that because I figure it keeps the riffraff out.
That's right.
It hasn't worked.
We don't have alligators. We don't have crocodiles.
No earthquakes.
We don't have earthquakes. I don't know how the mosquitoes survive this, though.
Yeah.
But thanks, everyone, for joining. Thanks, everyone, for watching. If you watched on the replay. Thanks, everyone, for chat. If you have any other comments, let us know what you want to talk about next Friday or coming up. Let us know. If you have any events, send them to us. tcdnmra@gmail.com.
Right.
Heath's channel is in the link. And catch the second section podcast.
Yep.
Spoon and Andy put on a really good show, and you can join in there. And lots of laughs, lots of fun, lots of tips.
Yep.
So Roy says earthquakes are nothing.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, okay. Come have a tornado or two. So.
There you go.
I want to get into Weather Channel. So. All right, we'll end it here, and I'm going to tell you guys to stick around. And Say good night, everyone.
Good
Night,
night.
everyone.
Like,
See if I can pop this up here and get the correct thing going here. There we